encourage everyone. Oh, thank you. I would encourage you to keep your cameras on if possible. We know there's a lot of reasons why people keep their cameras off. That's totally fine. However, we also know it's nice for speakers to see faces. So if you are able to put your camera on, that's great. Like Jenny said, she will be muting everyone. But if you do want to ask a question, you can either put it in the chat, as I said, or unmute at any time. And we will pin the speaker so that everyone can see Dustin. So just to get started, my name is Shoshana Funk. I'm a social worker and clinical services manager of Helping at Jewish for Good. My colleagues are here today, Stacy Abramowitz, Jenny Schwartz, and Jordana Brown. So thank you for joining us for this special program funded in part with grants from the Carolina Foundation for Jewish Seniors and the Leon Levine Foundation. Jewish for Good's Helping Department offers a comprehensive range of services that help people meet life's challenges. We deliver high-quality professional social services for adults and their families through all stages of life. This includes counseling, case management, financial assistance, food pantry, and programs like this one. Much of what we offer is free, and all of it is open to everybody, Jewish or not. So for more information, I invite you to visit our website, jewishforgood.org, to look at some upcoming programs we have planned, like Shmooze and Nosh, Care Partner Support Group, and Memory Cafe programs. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our wonderful speaker today, who is our colleague here at Jewish for Good, Dustin Raymer. He's the Director of Health and Wellness at Jewish for Good. The presentation title is Exercise Prescription Through Life. And Dustin has a BS and MS in exercise physiology with over 13 years in the health profession. Dustin is experienced in health promotion, cardiac healthcare, and behavioral weight loss, and is sure to have answers to a variety of questions and topics. So welcome, Dustin. I will turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, Shoshana. I will share my screen here before we get too far into it and get this up for you. Everyone should be able to see kind of the title screen here on this PowerPoint. Yes, thank you. Again, I'm the Health and Wellness Center Director here. I have the bachelor's and master's in exercise physiology. Usually people want to know, what does that mean? Physiology in general, it talks a lot about how the body works within certain parameters. And so mine in particular is with exercise. And so our studies were a lot focused on prescribing exercise to either prevent certain chronic diseases from forming, or retroactively try and get you back on the healthy side, whatever that disease may have been. Again, my experiences are corporate health. I was a wellness coach for a while. I worked in cardiac diagnostics, looking at heart conditions through exercise over at Duke for a while. So a wide range of experiences and paths to bring to the table today. We're going to jump into this looking at the general exercise recommendations. A lot of people have heard these numbers before, hopefully. I remember as a kid, every once in a while, the news on the morning channel would talk about everyone needs to get 30 minutes of cardio. Everyone needs to get, 5 days of this or that. Drink wine for your heart health, just oddball things you'd hear. And so these recommendations originated from, like, what is the bare minimum to get to maintain your current health status, right? Rarely do I get an inquiry for exercise recommendations from someone who is looking to maintain their health. Most people are looking, to improve some aspect of it. And so when you think of it that way, these numbers are really just enough to hold steady. 30 minutes of moderate intensity cardio 5 days a week, or you can get 25 minutes of vigorous 3 days a week. What does that mean? So moderate and vigorous are referring back to certain heart rate ranges. For those who want to dive deeper into it, your predicted heart rate max is 220, so 220, minus your current age. That's your predicted max heart rate. So for easy math, if you're 20 years old, that would be 200. This is and anticipation of what you could maximally get to. This is full out effort, everything you got. So rarely are you ever going to get near this. And then the moderate intensity would be about 65 to 75% of that number. That would be working pretty hard, you're breathing heavy, probably couldn't carry a good long conversation, but you could sustain that for 30 or 40 minutes probably. And then towards the bottom of the screen here, you see and moderate high intensity weight training 2 days a week. So weight training for me has been what has been the biggest benefit for what research is showing lately, to add to the benefit of adding muscle mass and improving your overall health, bone structure, what quality of life. So this is all standard stuff. So the standard maintaining your health. But again, like I said, most people want to improve their health. So how do we do that? Well, you have to start looking at the variables that are manipulating. So on this slide here, you see the word FITT. FITT stands for frequency, intensity, time, and type. These are 4 variables that we can manipulate and make a little harder, one at a time, to start elicit some benefits. And so on the next slide here, we'll see what those mean. Frequency, intensity, time, and type. Frequency for an aerobic standpoint would be how many days a week are you doing the thing? You know, are you swimming in the pool, you're riding a bike, jogging, rowing, going for a walk, you know, whatever it may be. So if you're currently doing 3 days, going to 4 would be increasing your frequency. Intensity for cardio would be going from that moderate to that vigorous level. So taking your heart rate from 125, pushing it to 135 next time. That would be an intensity increase. Time, probably the most straightforward one. If you walk for 30 minutes today and you go to 40 minutes tomorrow, that's an increase in your time. The last one could be the most complicated. It's type. What does that mean? That means what activity you're doing. So if you've been swimming for the last 20 years, you're slowly going to get less and less benefit from swimming because you're becoming more efficient at it. But if you started rowing or riding a bike, that's a new type of activity that you can mix in there, and you'll get a bigger response for less effort. Same thing with strength, but a little different. Days per week is the same. Intensity is how much weight you're using. And so, you know, if you're used to doing the 50-pound weights, you go to the 60s, that is an increase in intensity. So again, these are still what you see on the screen, guidelines to maintain health. And the reason they picked these guidelines, we have something called a dose response. So as we introduce a stimulus, sometimes more stimulus means more response, and that's a good thing. But at some point in time, that curve tends to drop off a little bit. So if you're already walking 6 days a week, 30 minutes a day, adding a 7th day is better, but it's not going to have a huge impact, right? So then we start talking about risk and reward. Yes, it adds a benefit, but going 7 days and not giving yourself a day off may introduce more risk. And especially as we age, recovery becomes harder. You know, when you're 21 years old, you can go in the gym, work hard on Monday, go back on Tuesday, and you're probably fine. But once you pass middle age and further, recovery becomes a lot more part of the conversation, right? And so just like on that first slide I talked about, if we want to improve health, we're going to have to change one of these parameters and make it harder: frequency, intensity, time, and type, beyond what that standard is. The good news is, if you're not even meeting the standard, just by getting to the standard, you're going to start seeing improvements. Improvements can be anything you want it to be, any goal you want to have. May it be, I want to eventually do a 5K race. Well, we can work towards that by increasing your aerobic frequency. If you eventually want to gain some muscle on your body, well, we can work towards that by increasing the time, how many reps you do on something, making that harder. The last component that tends to be overlooked a lot is this 4th thing down here on the bottom, is adding physical activity. Physical activity and exercise tend to be used synonymously when in fact they are not the same thing. So physical activity would be defined as unplanned things you do throughout the day, right? If we chose to have a standing desk during this Zoom meeting, that would be adding physical activity to your day. If you choose to take the stairs, not the elevator, parking further at the grocery store parking lot, these are all physical activity things. We don't count heart rates. We don't count how many minutes we did it. We just do it because we're trying to add some movement in our lives. And so that tends to be I wouldn't say missing link, but the biggest bang for your buck. If you're already doing some exercise, but not addressing physical activity makes a big bulk of your day. If you think about all the times you could be standing or could be walking a little further, they add up in the course of a day, usually well beyond the time you would spend in the gym. Okay. Changes with the age. Now, I at times can be cynical about this because in general, from the age of 5 or 6 all the way to the age of 60 plus, the recommendation doesn't change that much. Do a little more, make sure you're doing enough to elicit a response, but not overdoing it that you're not recovering enough. And so the variables may change slightly, but overall, that's the gist and that's the goal. Uh, Early on in youth and older adult looks very similar. We're improving coordination, we're increasing our physical activity or playtime, and we're developing interests. Somewhere in our young adulthood, all the way through middle age, retirement age, we kind of start prioritizing work, family, jobs, things like that. So we kind of learn, we forget how to coordinate our bodies, learn how to forget how to have playtime, set aside time just to move around and do things. And so early on in life, we're developing interest. We want to see, is this kid a climber, or are they someone who's going to be, more on the ground and doing things, balancing on foot? If you think about games we used to play, hopscotch, jumping, twisting, landing on one foot, these are all things that I actually do take 60 plus year olds through now because we have forgotten it over the last 55 plus years. The middle ranges, the 16 to 65, a lot of that is when we talk about general population. When we look at general recommendations, general guidelines, these are the age ranges that most research has been backed on and funded on. During this time, in your early 20s, maybe early 30s, you have the biggest ability to increase muscle mass. And so that's, again, one of the focuses of this talk. We'll get to it here in a second. But adding muscle mass to your body in your 20s and 30s has a huge impact on how well your 40s plus, 50s plus goes for you. It doesn't mean adding it in the 60s and it's not worth it. It just means that when we increase that mass in the beginning, we tend to keep it a little longer later in life. And like I said, towards the end, we're looking at older adults, 60 plus. Again, we're reintroducing balance and coordination. We're thinking about lifestyle choices. Whether you had an active or an inactive sedentary work, once we retire, the tendency is to, again, not be very physical active. Even if we're finally adding in exercise, that ultimately, maximally, can only be 7 days a week, maybe an hour a day. 7 hours a week of exercise is great, but what about the other, hundreds of hours in a week we have to not sit and watch TV, not sit, and do things while we're sedentary. This brings up more of a medical side of things. This term metabolic syndrome has been around 20 plus years, maybe in 30 or 40 by now. And most people say it, they throw it around, maybe their doctor has said it to them, but deep down, it may not mean a lot to them. Metabolic syndrome is a combination of pre recommendations for having certain parameters for your health. So most people know what blood pressure is. That's one of the components to this. So if you have 2 of these 5 risk factors, you would be classified as having metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome then would mean you have a higher predisposition for certain chronic diseases. We'll go through these just from a medical standpoint. We're going to use terms that may not be, the most pleasant to hear, but these are medical terms we're using. First one is a large waistline. So what a large waistline typically identifies is we have a larger amount of intra-abdominal fat in our body, and a larger amount of intra-abdominal fat means you have fat around your organs. You also have a different kind of fat called subcutaneous, which is the fat under your skin. You can have subcutaneous under your arms, under your legs, your face, your neck. Those aren't as detrimental versions as the version that's around your organs, right? So that's one of your risk factors. High triglycerides. So most people have heard this term before. Triglycerides are the free-floating fatty acids floating around your bloodstream. If you have high triglycerides, you have a higher chance of building up plaque inside your arteries, and that's why that's a risk factor. The third one is low HDL. So HDLs are the good, quote, good cholesterols. And typically what they do is they help facilitate the expulsion of your low density, your LDL type of cholesterols. So having those high would actually be a good thing. Number four, high blood pressure, probably the most common on the list here. You go to a doctor, you go for anything, you're getting your blood pressure taken. Back when I started school, about 15 plus years ago now, the number was 120 over 80. If you're anything above 120 over 80, you got high blood pressure, bad things. But as research has come more recently, pushing those numbers up to the 130s may not be as bad as I used to think. But obviously, chronic high blood pressure, especially in the 160s, 170s, if you're carrying around that, it's a lot of work the heart's doing. So the way I describe this is kind of like a garden hose. If the faucet, the spigot at your house is your heart, and we're trying to pump it through your blood vessel, the hose, but you've got debris, dirt daubers, things have been packed in there. Your faucet's going to have to work hard to push that blood through there, and every time your heart beats, that's just more backing up of pressure that can strain the heart in time. And the last one's high glucose, another familiar one here. There's a little bit of misconception sometimes. So high glucose in itself is not necessarily a problem. What is the problem is insulin insensitivity. So if we chronically introduce our body with more and more glucose, more and more sugar, we have to release more insulin to combat that, to bring it back down. And so over time, the more times we do that, that insulin becomes a little less and less effective. I usually relate this to like a pain medicine. You have pain on day one, you take one pill, a week later, maybe you need two. And so the efficiency of that medication has dropped. Same thing with insulin. The insulin insensitivity has built up. And so, like I said before, if you have two of these five, technically you have metabolic syndrome. The good news is, while there may be medications that lower blood pressure, lower glucose, increase your HDLs, lower your triglycerides, being on a medication still means you have a risk factor in that category. And so the only thing really that can combat all of these all at once is a proper diet and exercise, and having that, the cardio factor, the strength factor, the flexibility factor, and the physical activity all working in unison can help every single one of these in a way. This one usually is one that has tons of questions. So if you think of a question that you want to write it down, and we'll cover it at the end. This is a big topic here. Stacy had sent me some questions, and ironically and luckily, I had already had a slide on, I think, 3 or 4 of these questions. We're talking about bone density. Bone density is not a new thing, but I think the research is still really driving home some of these features that may not be well known. Bone density, we're usually referring to osteoporosis or osteopenia. Osteoporosis is as you see in the photo on the bottom left here, the sponginess part of your bone, the middle part of your bone is becoming weaker, less dense. And then osteopenia is the size, that the bone size itself is dropping. And so both of these are risk factors. And as you age, it's one of those things that's hard not to stay away from. What is the risk of osteoporosis? If you're osteoporotic and you fall, you could break a hip, you could break a wrist, whereas someone 30 years ago or healthier bones may not. They may crack it, slightly break it, but it wouldn't be something that's detrimental to come back from. And so, what are some of the reasons or ways we can kind of combat this, what seems like an inevitable future for most people? Weight-bearing exercises is that term that most doctors first say. Be on your feet more, find ways to exercise on your feet. So that's all weight-bearing means. It means being on your feet, moving on your feet. Riding a bike is not weight-bearing. Doing water classes is not weight-bearing. Are those two things good for your heart health? Yeah, you're doing cardio. You're able to do cardio because your joints feel better in the warm water. The bike allows you to go an extra 20 minutes because you're not sitting on you're not working your knee joints and things like that. But from an osteoporosis standpoint, weight bearing is one of those factors we have to have. Another thing is increased muscle mass. So as we age, in general, our mass tends to drop, whether it's losing muscle, fat, bone, whatever component in your body. As we age, we tend to lose kind of all of it. And losing muscle would be one of the bigger impacts of why osteoporosis increases. On our bones, at each part of our bone, we have a muscle attached somewhere, usually on the ends of these bones. And what happens is if those muscles are bigger, stronger, or just worked more often, it puts small torques and small twists on these bones that it requires the bone to build up. Otherwise, the muscle would snap the bone in half, and that's never going to happen. So, the more we strength train, the more we use these muscles, the bone has to keep up. It has to stay in line with the muscles. The third thing that impacts, similar to weight bearing, impact every time you take a step, that's an impact on the ground. But doing a low impact type of aerobics, like a stair class or step class, you're not jumping up on the box, but every time you step off of it, that's an extra added 3, 4, 5 inches that increases that distance you're falling to, and then bam, that's an impact on the ground. Again, the vibrations up those bones are what stimulates more bone growth. The fourth one here is usually a surprise to people, higher calories. If I wanted to add muscle to my body, I'm going to have to eat more calories than I'm expending. That makes sense. If I want to increase fat in my body, I've got to eat more calories than I'm expending. If I want to build bone, just a different version of material, if I want to add bone to my body, I'm going to have to increase or intake more calories than I'm expending. And so, again, you may see this already with yourself. You may see this with your parents. As we're aging and doing slightly fewer and fewer activities, our appetite tends to drop. And if our appetite's dropping, we eat less. The problem is if we eat less, then our appetite drops more. And it's kind of this cascade snowball effect of I'm eating a little less, I got smaller. I'm eating a little less, I got smaller again, my appetite's gone. And so one of the biggest factors about bone density is, can we keep our calories high enough to not make our bones start to wither away? Higher body weights. So no, I don't want we just gaining weight just to gain weight. But in general, if you look at across the spectrum, osteoporosis tends to impact those with underweighted bodies rather than higher or even obese bodies. Again, if you think about it, 100-pound person walking is not impacting the ground as hard as a 300-pound person walking. It just physically makes sense. Obviously, there's a conversation about healthy body weight versus under or over body weights. Balanced diets, calcium intake, vitamin D intake, making sure we're taking enough, and we have a bigger slide on this later, but adequate amounts of protein, calcium, things like that. The last thing is sunlight. There's growing research about having direct sunlight for about 15 to 20 minutes across your entire day adds in your vitamin D and calcium absorption. You don't need to walk outside and get 20 straight minutes in the morning with no sunscreen on, but getting 5 minutes here and there adds up over the course of the day. And basically on the lower side, what lowers bone density, it's pretty much the exact opposite. Someone who's more sedentary, a low calorie diet, too low of body weight, little to no impact activities. Processed food is a growing area of interest for research right now. And then obviously we have things that are not in your control. Certain medical treatments are going to decrease bone density. We're basically pulling energy out of your body, out of your muscle, out of your fat, out of your bone, just to heal our body sometimes. And sometimes you just aren't in control of that. And that's understandable. But once we kind of traverse that problem, hopefully we can get back into the a healthier side of things. Looking at evidence with all physical activity, all strength training, everything kind of combined. This is a meta-analysis that I pulled because I think it does a good job of explaining what's better. Like if I'm going to pick one thing, what's better than the other? Obviously, a well-rounded exercise routine is the gold standard. But here we're looking at the recommendations versus the evidence rating. Anything C and above is considered great. You should do it. Obviously, you should do it. They didn't pull in like the D's and the F's because that's not the valid stuff. So just looking at the A's here first. So resistance training preserves muscle strength and functional fitness in adults. To me, that sounds like a dull comment. Most people would also agree with that. But in terms of its rating, that's an A versus the C down there. Flexibility exercise improves and maintains joint range of motion. Most people would think strongly that stretching is good for range of motion, but it still only gave a C rating. So think about how much more beneficial the resistance training preserves muscle mass comment is there. Same thing with that second from the bottom. Balance exercises, Tai Chi, yoga, can improve, maintain physical function and reduce falls in older adults at risk of falling. So just as good as strength training in terms of evidence, just doing balance training. We don't have to do flexibility. But balance training is a huge impact on how evidence-based it is. And of course, we still have the B's up there. They're good stuff. It's resistance training. Physical activity is better than being sedentary. So some pretty straightforward stuff. Again, I just talked about a lot of this, but in terms of the details, I can make a statement, but under each one of these is the why. Weightlifting and strength training. So research shows that cardio and weight bearing exercises limits your loss of bone mass. I've said it, research suggests it, but it limits. There's not a lot of evidence for cardio or weight bearing increasing bone mass. It just holds it steady. Whereas there's tons of research coming out now where weight training and strength training increases bone density, right? So if you're trying to reverse the process, we need to add strength training. And strength training is just more than you're doing now, right? So if you take someone who already strength trains and they want to do more, well, that's a pretty big leap, right? Bench pressing, 100 pounds a day and trying to get to 150, that's a big leap. But if you currently don't, adding anything is a great place to start. So it can be as simple as adding the 5-pound dumbbells, 10-pound dumbbells. We'll get into what the details of a good routine looks like here in a second as we age. But again, doing nothing and going to something is a huge improvement. I hinted on the vegetables earlier, vitamin C. Where can you get those from? Calcium throughout the day. There was a research article I looked at that was comparing the same amount of calcium in a day, same amount of units, and they got it all in breakfast versus comparing getting a third of that amount in breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And spreading it over your day tends to actually lead to better absorption. So think about that. Eat foods rich in vitamin D and K. Remember, D is what helps absorb the calcium. Sunlight also improves that. Maintain a moderate weight. Again, cycling weight loss and weight gain actually tends to decrease bone density more than just maintaining a above or below average weight. So if you just maintain your weight, regardless of what it is, it's better than cycling. But in general, having at least a normal up to an overweight body is the sweet spot for continuing to maintain your bone density. We talked about calorie diets or a low calorie diet earlier, more protein. Omega-3 fatty acids, salmon, nuts, and seeds are huge in terms of increasing the absorption of your calciums and vitamin Ds. Heavy drinking, alcohol consumption decreases calcium absorption. So again, if that's something you battle with, it could be a beneficial thing to do there. Earlier, so this is kind of getting away from the book. Yeah.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to jump in because someone had a question, I think, about that slide. Is resistance training a form of strength training?
Yeah, so resistance training is the same thing as strength training. Resistance just means you're introducing something beyond your body weight. So resistance could be barbells, dumbbells, bands. So resistance bands are a form of strength training and resistance training. Basically anything that's beyond your body weight. A machine leg press is a form of resistance and strength training. Yep. So weight training, strength training, resistance training, all pretty synonymous. Yeah, it's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Physical activity and exercise. This, personally to me, is one of the biggest aha slides I want people to kind of take home. I talked about it earlier when we talked about what does exercise and physical activity mean. But again, just to give you the visual of what I kind of pinpointed, physical activity in general are unplanned things. You plan them, like you plan where to park. You made that decision, but we didn't wake up this morning thinking, and in line with, I'm going to get my 20 minutes of biking in, but I'm also going to park at the grocery store further. You just make that decision right there in the moment. So physical activity, taking the stairs when you can, grocery store parking far enough away where it feels like, okay, I'm making a good decision here. Physical activity, we try our best to sprinkle those in throughout the day. We have a hard time of getting all our physical activity in an hour because we don't have that many decisions to make. But again, I'm sitting in a chair right now. A physical activity decision could have been to stand to do this. Most of your calories are expended. Again, I don't like to harp too much on calories in, calories out, weight loss, things like that. But if you compare the ability to burn calories through exercise compared to how much you have available to burn or to increase by, physical activity is 3-4 times as much usually per day. There's more opportunities there than it is through exercise. Exercise in descriptions would be planned things. You planned your 3 days out. You planned your group exercise, classes out. They're structured. They're usually time constrained. I'm going to do this for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. The class is an hour, that kind of stuff. You have a specific activity in mind. Again, some people can show up to the gym and not have a plan, but most people tend to kind of know what they're going to do. And then and exercise is usually related to a larger routine or a larger goal. Um, Again, it's nice to get to a place where you just exercise because it's healthy and it's what you should do. But I would say that most people have some sort of long-term goal, whether it's a performance-based goal, doing a 5K, a half marathon, triathlon, a weightlifting event. Usually exercise is part of a longer term goal at some point in time. All right, so this is where we start to get into the bigger questions, or like the more in-depth questions I usually get when someone wants to do personal training or have a workout routine designed for them. How much of this, how much weight should I use? How many reps should I do? How hard should my cardio be for myself? And that changes a little bit as you age and based on your interests. Again, I keep talking about like a performance event. If you are going to be a competitive 5K runner or a marathon runner, your intensities, your efforts are going to have to be higher than someone who's looking to just maintain or slightly improve their health. If you're exercising for health, I want my heart to function very well. I want my muscles to be strong when I'm, in my 70s. That person's going to exercise a little different than the competitive version of any of that. And so when we start talking about how much or how much effort should I put in the scientific world, we have what's called METs, METS. It's metabolic equivalents. So one MET is basically you laying down, sleeping, but you're awake. That's if you did that for 24 hours, that's what we call your metabolic minimum. Your 2,000 calories a day of burning just by being alive. If you go up to two METs, what that means is in that bout of exercise, you burn twice as many calories as you would if you were to have been laying down. So in theory, if you were able to exercise for 24 straight hours, maintaining that effort the entire time, you're going to burn double the calories you would have over the whole day versus you sitting there doing nothing. We can't do that. We can only exercise for usually an hour, 2 hours at the most, right? So during those 2 or 3 hours, you can increase those METs to 3, 6, sometimes 10, levels. Now, anything above 9 is like a full out, I'm sprinting and I've got 30 seconds left in me. So you're not getting into the 9 METs. I don't want really anyone on this lecture to worry about METs. That's just a scientific way of it. We have an equivalent way of describing this. We have what's called the RPE scale. It's RPE, it's rate of perceived exertion. The catch is this is a perceptive thing. So you have to be honest with yourself. Am I actually putting forth the effort that I think I am? But it's a 0 to 10 scale. The bottom one is what they're talking about, 0 to 10. The top one is a 0 to 17, but the bottom version, 0 to 10. One is just standing, having a conversation, doing much of nothing. Two would be like your physical activity stuff, climbing the stairs, walking at the grocery store. 3 to 4, okay, now I've got like a slight maybe jog going or a power walk. I might be swimming some casual laps in the pool. Once we get to 5 or 6, like there's an effort-based thing there. You probably can last 20 to 30 minutes at that level before you're really starting to sputter out. That's where your performance side of things happens. My recommendation for anyone who's trying to improve their health, blood flow, heart function, stay in that moderate range, which is actually just only 3 to 4 RPE scale. 3 to 4 RPE scale, again, it's, you could probably sustain this for 60 minutes, have a pretty good conversation, not be out of breath when you're doing it. And that's all you need on top of, strength training and stuff like that. But this is from a cardio standpoint. Great. So let's look at the exact same conversation, but related to physical strength training. So this is where, most people from a cardio standpoint, we've rode bikes our whole lives. We went on walks our whole lives. Strength training could be something very foreign to anyone in any age range because it's a little extra. It's something we didn't grow up doing as a kid. And so depending upon your goal, there are certain recommendations for, should I do a very, very heavy 1 rep, or should I do a moderate 10 reps, or should I shoot for 20, 25, 30 reps? Like, what's the limit here? Like, we can technically count forever. We could do 100 reps. Based on your goal, it's kind of guide you or should guide you towards kind of one of these 4 options. There's still plenty of room in between all 4 of these options, but strength would be absolute strength. Like, how many times can you do something for like 1 or 2 reps? Like, full out hard strength training. The second one, hypertrophy, is the goal in mind to maintain or grow my muscle mass, which is where most people are at, whether they use the word hypertrophy or not, most people who are trying to improve their health, that's about where they should be. You're doing 3 or so sets of 6 to 12 reps of pretty much everything you do, all muscle groups. The power, again, power is more for sport performance. You're going to do a lower weight, but very explosive, fast reps, nothing that a typical gym goer needs to be doing. The bottom one is closer to the hypertrophy world. You're doing, lots of reps, trying to just get a good blood flow to your muscles. So what the current research is suggesting in terms of for someone who just needs a very simple way of thinking about it, we have this idea of called reps in reserve. So if I'm exercising and I know that I can do, 100-pound bench press for 10 reps, I cannot do the 11th rep, I'm going to fail. That means my max 10 reps is 100 pounds. The recommendation is to always leave 2 reps in reserve. So if I put 100 pounds in the bar, I would stop at 8. I could do 2 more, but 2 more is failure. So I'll stop at 8. I leave 2 in the tank. If I increase that weight to 125 pounds, maybe I can only eke out 6 reps, which that means I should stop at 4. So that's kind of the blanket, easy way of thinking about it. If you're downstairs in the weight room, using the pin loaded stuff, using free weights, whatever it is, pick a weight, go until 2 short of failure. Now, using my same example though, if I'll grab the 5-pound weight, I may get to 100 reps, right? And I don't want you doing that. So pick a weight that lands you somewhere between 6 and 12 reps by being 2 short of failure. That's about as blanket of a strength training statement as you can get. And you would do that for 2 or 3 reps for every major muscle group: leg press, shoulder press, lat pull downs, dumbbell rows, push-ups, body weight squats, things like that. The second thing here, risk and reward. Like I said earlier, if you're 20, you can recover right away. Like do a hard workout on Monday, come back in the gym on Tuesday, do it again. It's probably fine. But as we age, we have to kind of keep in mind of recovery. The biggest variable that changes as we age is frequency of strength training. Early in life, we could probably handle 4 to 7 days a week of pretty vigorous strength training. As we age, the frequency needs to drop, but not the intensity. So I still want you working pretty hard, leaving 2 reps in the tank on all your sets, but closer to 2 or 3 days a week spread across the week is the better recommendation now, just due to recovery. Recovery has a huge list of reasons why it slows down, age obviously being one of them, and things that come with age. But also, like I said before, as we age, we tend to have fewer calories coming in. And so that ends up being a factor as well. So if we can continue to keep our calories coming in, the recovery will actually be better and faster for those older adults. Benefits of strength training. One of the biggest things I tell people is strength has more carryover to your cardiovascular health than cardio has to your bone and muscle health. So if you're going to pick one thing, start here because it has bigger benefits. And like I said before, though, overall having a balance is the best. But if you have someone who does, body weight squats, weighted squats, they're actually going to be able to increase some of their like 1 mile times and walking ability versus someone who does runs, they're not going to increase their strength training abilities. So it's a carryover conversation. Okay. I believe Stacy will be or has been collecting some of these references that you guys should be able to refer back to. If anyone wants to come back into it and get this later, screenshot it, whatever you want to do. A lot of the information I pulled from some of these websites. The second one there, ACSM, so that's the American Council on Sports Medicine. It's one of the biggest reference materials for exercise-related research articles. It's the governing body of my clinical exercise physiologist certification. So that's a good resource to kind of dive into. The exercises medicine, I guess the second from the bottom one. So in 2010, the ACSM and other ACE fitness and things like that kind of pulled together and tried to push this idea that exercise is medicine. It's something that we can prescribe. It's something that we can manipulate over time, just like a medication would be, that can be addressing some of these chronic diseases. So the exercises medicine realm is something you guys can Google and really dive deep into. And then I don't remember the specific questions, but a couple of these here address that. So I believe one of the questions was, where could I find reliable resources to find exercises that combat knee health, pain, knee pain, back pain, hip pain, things like that. Uh, the AARP Exercise for Seniors website is a great resource. I've used it in the past for at-home workouts to send to people. But the way it works is kind of like a Google type-in block. So you go to AARP, it says, what are you looking for? You type in exercises for knee pain, and then it pulls up 5, 10 different workout routines, exercises that you can follow with very good descriptions of the right form, how many reps you should do, what you should think about. So I recommend just starting there. If you do no strength training, that would be a great place to start. If you have some elements that you're trying to work around, that's where I would start as well. About 20, 30 years ago, when I really started getting into this world, I would never recommend a YouTube video because of what the reliability of it. But nowadays, if you hop on YouTube and type in exercises for knee pain, first 10 things you're going to find something valuable and worthwhile to watch and do. So I would trust those resources now, for sure. Believe that is it for me. I stopped sharing.
Thank you so much, Dustin. That was so interesting and helpful, I think, for folks of all ages. I was paying close attention to some of that information as well. Do folks have any particular questions about anything that came up, or just any other sort of strength training or exercise physical activity questions for Dustin while we have him?
Shoshana, I do.
Oh, go ahead.
Dustin, one of the things that I see is very popular right now is chair yoga. Are you familiar with that? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think chair yoga came about probably. This is me making a big assumption, but probably right. The fact that at some point in time we don't want to get on the floor, off the floor, on the floor, off the floor, and so chair yoga was designed to give that middle ground for a lot of our individuals who have that issue. Chair yoga is still yoga, so it's going to be more focused on balance, coordination, flexibility. In terms of what category do I drop it into? It's not cardio, it's not strength, but it still does lead some benefits to that balance, coordination, flexibility world. And so when you talk about how much should I do of that per week, that would be in that 2 to 3 times sessions per week world.
Great.
Shoshana?
Yes.
Hi, it's Margarita. So I have a question about pain. So when you're exercising, I have heard that you should not exercise to the point where you have pain, or you have pain while you're exercising. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's going to vary person to person. If you're very in tune with your body, like extremely in tune with your body, you probably know where this pain's originating from, right? So, if you're able to do push-ups, for example, and you did 20 of them, you're going to have a muscle burn pain, like your chest muscles burned out, your arms are burning from a muscle standpoint. It shouldn't become a intolerable level of pain. It should be like, oh, I'm working. There's a slight pain here in the sense of like a muscle burning side of things. That's different than my elbows hurt, my shoulders hurt, my neck hurts, right? So if an exercise causes pain from a joint standpoint, yeah, you should, I wouldn't say avoid the motion. You should avoid that exercise for now, but addressing the issue. If it's something like you have a knee replacement and certain joint angles hurt, well, that's not something we really can work through too much. But if you have an imbalance in your shoulders and that's causing neck pain when you do something, addressing the imbalance first and then working towards the neck pain or away from the neck pain is kind of the goal. So you're right. If you are able to identify that this pain is a joint pain, yeah, avoid it. But if we're new to exercise and new to what our bodies can and can't do and feels like, there are plenty of anecdotal times where I've said, do this. The first rep, the person says it hurts. And like, let's just do a couple more. and it doesn't hurt all of a sudden. Sometimes we have this subconscious avoidance of exercise. So being in tune with your body and understanding, like, is this real pain or is it just me avoiding this motion? Usually is the first one to get over. But yes, you are absolutely right. We should not work through pain, especially if it's real, like joint bone pain.
Thank you.
There's a question in the chat as well, just about best things for osteoporosis and back degeneration.
Yeah. If you, so back degeneration, whether it be, the discs themselves or again, related to osteoporosis, the vertebrae themselves shrinking and becoming fragile. And that's always that risk and reward with someone who's already kind of crossed the threshold of osteoporosis. Bringing them back is a fine line to walk. We're not going to say, oh, it's your first day in the gym, I know you have osteoporosis, here's a 50-pound bar, put on your back and squat. Like that, we're not going to do that. That's not safe. However, we have to start somewhere, and that somewhere could be squats in the pool on the water, hang onto a wall, just to kind of get the motion down. And then we're coming and doing, whatever, TRX squats and body weight squats, kind of building that threshold up. If the previous version of a squat did not cause harm or did not cause pain, at some point in time, we move to the next version. And that's the buildup, right? You may see somebody on the internet squat 500 pounds. That wasn't their first time squat. They started at 200 and worked to 300 and built their way up. So with any stage, we would always start at the least risky, still very little benefit, but least risky version, and find our way up to something that's safe. Someone who's very far involved and very deep into their osteoporosis diagnosis, sometimes just stationary bracing techniques is all we need to do to start with. If you think about like a plank holding on the ground, or a wall, sit on the wall, we're not moving. We're just bracing our body and bracing our muscles. That could be the safest place to start to not elicit any type of future break or future problem from being far into your diagnosis.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I believe I do not know where to start. So are there personal trainers, including you, Dustin, who work with seniors who have forgotten how to exercise?
Yes, absolutely. Are you here local?
Yes, I am. Well, I'm
Yeah.
a half hour from the J.
Yeah, we have a couple trainers. There's one in particular that has I can't remember the specific title of it, but it's basically a senior health personal trainer. So looking at balance coordination, looking at getting someone started in a right way. All of our trainers can adapt to whatever your needs are, right? You're not the first time we've come across anyone who's like, I forgot how to exercise. It's a common thing.
Not to
yes.
forget, too lazy to exercise, or whatever you want.
Yep. Whatever we're chalking up to, I think we do have somebody on site that can help you for sure.
Excellent, thank you.
Do you want to share, Dustin, how folks can reach out to you, whether if they're a member or if they want to become a member?
Yeah, they actually don't have to be members to personal train here. Members do get a little bit of advantageous pricing, but if you are a non-member, you have access to it. I'll put it into the chat. So let me go here real quick.
Sure.
So on our personal services page, there's a button you can press that says click here to get started. It's basically a survey that tells you your name, what you're looking for, why do you need it, and kind of timeline. Can you work on Mondays or Saturdays, and whatever your requests are. And we can get that started once you fill that out. I'm looking.
And
So
we
if you
can,
guys can see.
we can certainly put that. So I think I mentioned in the chat that we'll put the video recording of today, the PowerPoints, all the links that Dustin shared for further review, and we can include this form as well with all of that if anyone's interested in getting started here with any of our personal trainers.
Yep. And it's not just personal training. I mean, we have Pilates. So Pilates is a form of strength training. They use springs instead of weights, but it elicits a similar response. So that's another one-on-one service we have. Another big component of this that some people sometimes overlook is just the accountability part of it, right? So seeing a trainer once a week, sometimes all I see you is once a week in the gym. So finding a way to get in that second and third day on your own We have a very wonderful health coach here who helps set up things in place to get you a little more accountable on your own end and set up goals and be a little more efficient with your time. Yeah, lots of options.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, there's a couple more questions coming into the chat. So the next one is, I've heard that isometric exercises are good for reducing high blood pressure. What are your thoughts?
I'd never heard that before, but thinking through it. So for those who aren't aware, isometric means same length. So an isometric exercise would be a holded exercise. So like a plank. On a plank, you're holding, your elbows are on the ground, your toes are on the ground, but your midsection's up off of it. You're using your core muscles to hold your hips up, right? So you're holding that position. So your core's working, but not moving. Same thing with like a wall sit. You put your back against the wall, go down to a squat and hold. The thighs, the calves, the back, all of it's working. It's just not moving through range of motion. I would not say isometric exercises are any better than exercises that go through range of motion at reducing blood pressure. There's actually a lot of research about strength training or body weight training, just exercise in general, but in particular the strength side of things, increasing or decreasing blood pressure, positively impacting blood pressure due to, so when you lift weights, when you do a squat, when you do anything, do a leg press downstairs, during that motion, that's a lot of pressure building up and you're pushing hard through that motion, your blood pressure jumps up quite a bit, right? But the more times it does that in an appropriate way, it tends to regulate itself when you're at rest. When you get in the water and you're doing your water fitness and you're exercising the bike, your blood pressure goes up during that 30-minute session. It goes up quite a bit sometimes, but in a good way. Your body's responding appropriately. Your blood vessels dilate, so your pressure has to go up to get the blood downstream. And so when we go back to rest, it actually goes back down and like hyper recovers and goes to a lower state. So strength training and cardio both play a huge part in blood pressure control.
And so you said the example of isometric, because I hear that a lot in yoga. Does that just sort of, if you're doing a yoga pose, does that just mean sort of like holding, like squeezing muscles?
Yeah, so I'm very unfamiliar with yoga, but on a surface level, if you hold a pose and you're not moving your body through the pose, you're technically in the state of isometric hold, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Somebody also asked, is all Pilates a form of strength training or just like maybe machines versus mats?
Yeah, it depends. And one, it depends who you ask, but also what your goal here is, right? So if you take someone who's never done, quote, strength training, and you put them in a mat Pilates class, their muscles are come out fatigued. So yes, that would be a form of strength training. There's, we use the circles, you hold planks, you might do some body weight squat holds, some, narrow grip push-ups, some wall sits. Like, so in general, yes, we're doing some version of strength training, but the only resistance we have there is usually body weight. So not going to elicit huge responses. But again, if you're coming from nothing, mat Pilates, which is usually group exercise version, you're getting a form of strength training. Going onto the Pilates machines is introducing true resistance training, where an apparatus is being resisted through. Is going to have the needle goes further towards true strength training.
Okay. Somebody also asked, are you planning any more sessions for introducing members to weight training? I think you have done a class like that in the past.
Yeah, so in the past, quarterly is kind of the goal lately. So quarterly, I have done this class called Barbell 101. It is designed for anyone who's beginner to advanced. The beginner side would be more like, what is a dumbbell and what are some exercises we can do with it? How can I manipulate this weight in space to elicit the responses I want? Advanced would be, hey, I know what I'm doing here, but I'm feeling a little lost in my programming. How do I go from a day a week to 2 days a week? Should I be doing this exercise combined with this exercise? What should my rest periods be? Things like that. We also have 4 members, a fitness center orientation. And so that it's free. You get it one time. You also get a free personal training session if you've never used it, for members, usually new members. But that can be used to say, hey, look, I just need 5 pretty straightforward full body exercises. Show me how to do those. I'll do these on my own. And then eventually buying a session or 2, maybe a future route. But to get you off the ground and try and get started, the orientation in that session usually goes a long way.
Great. Any other questions for our exercise guru today? I have a quick question because I know that pickleball has become very popular, and I actually recently learned how to play, and I know that's very popular amongst older adults. And I'm just curious if you have thoughts about other sort of like the benefits of doing something like that, or badminton or bocce or whatever, you know, something that's physical activity, structured, sort of a combination of the
Yeah.
two.
Yeah. All the examples you listed, have a lot of different benefits to our aging population. On the surface, pickleball, you are turning, pivoting, sometimes balancing on one foot while you hit the ball, swinging, hand-eye coordination, foot-eye coordination. All of that is on the physical side of things. You're probably getting your heart rate up at times. Pickleball is not on the level of like tennis where you're running a little more often, but it is better than sitting. It's better than just standing. You're getting some, heart rate up elicited. But on top of all of that, you've got the community aspect of it. If you say I'm a walker, I go on the trail, put my earbuds in, and I walk. It may be just as good physically as pickleball, but there's no community aspect of it. There's no. I'm looking forward to seeing Sally and Joe at the pickleball game. So what I've also seen a lot of is as the population ages, having that more of that community draw. It's accountability. It's relying on each other. And there's the emotional side of it too, and the just stress side of it. So all of those things play a huge part in your health.
Great. Wonderful. Any other questions? Well, if you do think of anything, certainly you can reach out to any one of us or to Dustin. As mentioned, we will certainly put the video for today, all the resources that Dustin provided, the PowerPoint, and the form to the health and wellness form that Dustin put in the chat. We will send out an evaluation form for today's program next week. And along with that, we can send the video or the page. So for those who are signed up for tomorrow, or if you are interested, our program tomorrow is called Caring for the Caregiver. And that will be with Brian Godfrey, who's a social worker at UNC Geriatrics Clinic. So we'll look forward to seeing some of you there. And thank you again, Dustin. That was so wonderful and helpful, informative, and just thank you for all that you do. And so happy to see all of you. Thank you for participating today and being with us today.
Yeah, thank you. You guys had great questions, and you can email me anytime, and I'll set us up some time to answer anything you need.
Awesome. We'll see you all tomorrow, I hope. Take care. Help remove people. That's helpful. And you're going so fast.
I'm not actually. For those if anyone just joined, the talk is actually over, and we hope to see you tomorrow.
Damn it.
Oh no. The website, we'll send it out, Bernie. Oh, he's not on anymore.
I think I put it in the chat.
You did. I think it was put in a few
I
times.
can try to put it in again.
No, he's not, he's no longer.
Oh, Bernie's here.
Oh, there you are.
There, I'll put it back in the chat. There you go.
Thanks, Jenny.
If that's the one you're looking for. I'm not sure if that's the one or if the one that Dustin had. And then here's the one that Justin had in terms of the inquiry form.
Someone want to turn off the recording?
Right. Thank you.
Sorry, I just saw it still on.